Welcome to the second week of this 8-week English 102 session. I'm your instructor, Klein Zollinger, once again. I hope you're having a good semester so far and things are going smoothly. One thing I wanted to say before we actually begin the lecture today is I have received a few questions from students, but you could be asking me more questions. I am always willing and eager to help students. So please let me know if you have any questions or you're having issues, you don't know what to do with Major Essay 1 or any of the assignments that you're working on for this course. I'm always happy to meet. I was unable to hold my office hours yesterday due to the technical issues I've been having with my computer. So if you want to meet with me this week, please send me an email and I'm happy to set up a time with you to get on Zoom. With that in mind, the other thing that I want us to do this week about drop-in hours is I mentioned last week that I had set a time that I was going to do for the beginning of the semester, but that I wanted to change it if there were other times that were more were easier for students to get to. So I have posted a thread in the announcement section. You can reply to that thread. Please reply with a day of the week and a time that would be convenient for you to come to drop-in hours. And I'll take a look at those and I'll schedule something different, or maybe we'll keep them the same. It really depends on what works for students. So let me know in that poll, and we'll go from there. So what I want to talk about first is research questions. I posted feedback on everybody's first draft of their research questions yesterday. Some of you may not have seen it before you posted the second draft of your research question where you kind of narrowed your focus. There were a few students who needed to greatly narrow their focus. This is something that's really common. It's really easy to come up with topics that are just way too broad to actually write an essay about. Maybe you need to write a book about them, right? There's so many questions that you want answers to that it just is too much for a relatively short research essay. But most students, you had great and interesting research questions that were clearly related to your fields of study, to your field of work, all those things. So great job. You followed instructions really well. And I saw some really great feedback on your peers' work. So keep that up in the discussion boards. That peer feedback is one of the best parts of a course like this. Writing is a really difficult task, and it's very difficult, especially to judge your own work and tell how it is. That's why feedback from others who read your work and don't have that attachment to it, they haven't worked on it for a long time, they're not, they can see what's going on there. We become blind to our own work sometimes when we're working hard on it and we spend time on it. So great job so far. One note about that is do not post late. Number one, if you post late, you may not get feedback from your peers. And so it's especially important to make sure that you also post the feedback to your peers on time. I did notice that quite a few students did not reply to their peers at all. If you don't reply to them, you will get a 0 on that part of the assignment. And if you look at your grade, you'll see that there are kind of two halves of that grade for the discussion board posts. One of them will be for the initial post, and the other grade is for the replies. So for this first research question assignment, for example, just posting your research question was worth 5 points, but replying to 2 of your peers was worth 10 points for a total of 15 points. So if you turned in your essay, your research questions, but you didn't reply to your peers, you got a 5 out of 15, which the way that the grades work, most of your grade is going to be your essays. So if you miss a week of feedback to somebody, it's not going to tank your grade, but you are only getting a third of the credit for the assignment. So keep that in mind. Please reply to your peers. Number one, for your grade, and number two, it is just really valuable to know what your peers think of your work. We need your voice. We need your feedback. So one thing I want to note is, if you notice, we had that first set of research questions that you had to post, and then there's a second kind of draft that you posted yesterday. For a lot of you, what you might have changed in between kind of that first draft of your research questions and the second is that you might have shifted your focus a little bit. Maybe you zoomed in on some aspect of a much broader subject, or maybe you changed entirely. That is okay. Those are very common things. We often go into projects wanting to know things, not really knowing what the research or the data or whatever says. So we might not have the best question to actually look at in an essay. You might not be able to answer it clearly with a thesis and a single essay. And so you might need to narrow it. Maybe you made one that's just so narrow that you can only write a few paragraphs about it. There's not enough data about it or something of that nature. So you may need to broaden it. Sometimes you'll find that as you've done some research, you might hit some wall. You can't find what you're looking for, or you find the exact opposite of what you thought you were going to find. So maybe you have to adjust your angle. You've got a little bit different angle that you're going to take on the question. Or maybe you just find this topic is not that interesting. I don't actually enjoy researching it. I don't have anything to say on this issue after all. That sometimes happens for students, and that's okay. It's okay to change your topic, especially even after posting your research questions for assignments. But if you do, please talk to me. Please come to my drop-in hours or email me, and let's talk about it to make sure that we're honing in on a topic that's actually going to work for you. I don't want you to go kind of running around in circles, not knowing what you're doing, and create more work for yourself. So I want to keep things as simple as possible for you. So check in with me. If you took English 101, English 101 uses MLA format for the citations, which is a very common citation style used mostly in the humanities, especially like English and things like that. But for research papers, many of which may be you may be researching things in a very specialized area of study, right? It may be biology, or it may be psychology, or it may be chemistry, or political science. It could be all sorts of things, right? All of these disciplines, not all of them, use MLA format in them. So for this class, we're going to use what is probably the more common citation style for research writing across many disciplines, which is what is called APA citation style. So I'll show you a little bit here in this slide what it looks like, but the key resource that you should be using, and I always tell students to use this, it is probably the best resource out there online for all of your citation, grammar, and writing questions is OWL at Purdue. That is that's their writing lab. That's what OWL stands for. Anyway, they have lots and lots of resources on their site. They have examples of different kinds of citations, how to cite things using in different situations, how do you cite different kinds of documents or pieces of media. How do you cite a podcast versus how do you cite a book? There are differences between APA and MLA. So if you kind of got used to MLA, so that's what you use in high school, which is very common, or you took English 101 last semester and you used MLA in that class, make sure that you're actually looking and using the correct citation style. I'll show you some more examples as we go through the semester, but let's kind of look at what information is generally needed and what it kind of looks like, specifically for the in-text citations, because this is where it's both kind of similar and different from MLA. So you always want to include the author and the year, and you're going to use page numbers. If you don't have page numbers, you're going to find some other logical way to locate things. Maybe you have paragraph numbers. So we'll look at what that looks like here in a second. The next thing is you should use signal phrases, which are phrases that tell the reader that you're about to quote or cite. Otherwise, maybe you're paraphrasing. maybe you're summarizing, whatever it is you're doing with a source. It says that you're going to be using a source. This information came from somewhere else. So, the most common one is according to, and then you use the last name of the person you're quoting, right? According to Jones, you're still going to need that year. So the year is going to go in the in-text citation, which is in parentheses, sometimes called by other people a parenthetical citation. They both mean the same thing. Those are the citations that happen in the actual essay, in the sentence, not on the works cited page. If you don't use a signal phrase, APA is difficult. Here's your citation, Jones, 1998, page 199. So this is what they should look like. This is where it's different from MLA. MLA, you don't have to have a page number or locate things always. But in APA, if you can, you need to. So when you do your reference page citations in assignments this week, do your best to do it correctly. Like I said, we're going to talk about this more throughout the semester. So specifically, not next week, but in the next module. I should have put next module in the notes here. In the next module, we'll be looking at a little bit more at this. So if you have questions, though, go back to the OWL at Purdue. That is the best. It's linked in Canvas, and it's great. I can't recommend it enough. It's probably the most useful writing resource online of anything. So let's talk about some research strategies, because you've kind of figured out what your research question is. You're just going to start looking for things to back up your points, to find out what are the answers to your questions. So the first thing we need to talk about is the three kinds of sources. There are three kinds of sources. The first one is a primary source, which are sources like if you're looking at historical data, it might be a journal entry of someone that was at a historic event. They wrote about it. Maybe they wrote a newspaper article in their local paper talking about their experience at an event, right? Primary sources come from the person who was there at the time. They aren't someone talking about something someone else did. They aren't looking at other research. They're not interpreting anything. They're just, this is the experience that I had. And usually, a lot of times these are in like first person. They're articles, they're journals, they're things like of that nature. The second type of source is secondary sources, and these are sources that kind of look at primary sources and interpret them. This might be, again, looking at history. You might find a paper that takes a bunch of primary sources about an event and goes through them and tries to figure out what actually happened. What was this event, and what did people actually experience? And kind of cross-references the different primary sources, talks about why people said this thing or that thing, interprets why they saw things the way they did, why they thought the things that they did at this time, right? So secondary sources are things like that. Tertiary sources, secondary sources can also be like scientific research, right? You do a experiment, and you interpret the data. You say, what does this actually mean? What can we take away from it? Your research notes, you took down some data, you made a table. That would be a primary source. The secondary source is talking about the experiment that you did and interpreting it. Tertiary sources are another step removed from the primary sources. They probably are looking at secondary sources. These are usually good for finding kind of general information. These are things like encyclopedias. Wikipedia is a great example of a tertiary source. We don't usually use that in a research paper for college, right? It's not the best source. People can edit it. It could be wrong. However, it is a good source because it does have its sources listed at the bottom. And this is what tertiary sources are really good for. You want to know a little bit of general information about a subject or an event, they'll give you some general information. They'll have a list of sources. And you can look at their list of sources to kind of find what research is actually out there, what documents are out there that might be helpful for you. And you can kind of work backwards from the tertiary source backwards to those primary sources so that you can get the best picture of whatever you're looking at. So I'm saying things like Wikipedia aren't always the best thing to use in a research paper, but I don't want you to think of tertiary sources as like always lesser or not as good, because they have their uses. All three of these kinds of sources are useful at times and are good to use for certain things. And you may find that you need some of all of them in order to create a clear picture of what you're talking about in your essay. So don't think, oh, I only want primary sources. Those are the best sources. That was someone there. Sometimes we need a little bit of a secondary source that can interpret what the primary sources said, so we can really make sense of them and understand what they actually mean. So one thing to think about as you're going into research is also you have to think about what field of study you're actually what your topic is in. Because depending on the field of study, you may be using different databases or different tools. They may require different things for sources, etc. So what field you're studying can have a big difference on what you're doing. And I will go over the databases later and show you exactly what I mean. There are different databases. There are humanities databases. There are like newspaper databases. There's like scientific research databases. There's all sorts of them. And you want to know which one you're going to use, because if you make a search for what you want in the wrong one, you're not really going to come up with anything. There might just be a big old zero results for you. So it's very important to know, oh yeah, this what I'm talking about, this is history, or this is biology, or this is literature, or whatever it is. And this is what I was talking about with tertiary resources, tertiary sources. This is what we call lateral resources. We can use what we can find to find even more sources. We can work backwards. Find one source, find the sources for that source, find where that sources came from, and work backwards until you come to the most authoritative or the best source that you can find. One other thing to think about when you're researching is sometimes you really have to change up your search terms. AI can be a good tool here to say, like, come up with, here's what my research is. What search terms should I try? And it can come up with some for you. That's useful for some students. But sometimes students are looking and they can't find anything, and they say, I can't find anything. What should I do? And, well, what did you search? And we go to the database and they show me what they searched. And we'll kind of brainstorm. Well, how do we say this a little differently? What other words could we use? And once we change them up a little bit, that's when there's now a bunch of search results that came back from their edited search with different words in it. So if you're not finding anything, it might not be that it doesn't exist. It might just be that you're not typing the right thing into the search bar. And this is tough, and you kind of just learn by doing, right? You kind of figure out, oh yeah, these are the kinds of words that are going to get me what I want in my field of study. And you'll start recognizing them and knowing what phrases to use, things like that. So always just be thinking about, is there a better way to say what I'm asking for in the search bar, whether you're using Google or a library database or whatever you're using. That applies to them all. Then another way to kind of find things if you're struggling, this is also part of lateral research, is like maybe looking up something that's related, but not exactly. So like, here's an example. How is artificial intelligence expected to change the future of dentistry? If you can't find any results for that, well, what about, quote, putting quotation marks in your search bar, change the future of medicine? And see what happens. And see what might be similar. Your essay needs to be narrow, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your sources have to be as narrow as your topic is. You can use things that don't directly, aren't exactly what you're talking about, but they give you some insight into what you're talking about and can work. So My last suggestion for research, and this one's really important, is don't just use one thing. Don't just go into Google and type one search and go through 300 pages of results and think you found everything there's to find. Try different databases. Um, try there's a lot of different things too, like you can put a lot of different symbols and things into your search terms into most databases, and specifically like Google, put quotations and marks around something to let the search engine know that you only want those exact words. Or you can put a plus to put multiple terms together. There's all sorts of little things that you can and tricks that you can learn to help make your research go easier. Now, in your research, one of the key other resources that you should use is the library. CWI has one, of course, but what's really important is going to their website. I'm going to get out of this presentation here and pull up the library's website in a minute and show you where you can find all these things. But I just want to let you know that it's one of the easiest ways to ensure that you can find peer-reviewed sources. And when you're doing a research paper, peer-reviewed sources are kind of the gold standard, right? We want, if we're talking about science, we want to look at a source that had a study that was reproducible by others, right? If someone does it one time, maybe that's not the best data. Maybe they did something wrong. They didn't account for something that's skewing their data. We don't know. But when that study gets sent to others and they try to reproduce the data and they are able to, that says, okay, this seems valid. This is a pretty good study. That's how we know that it's good, that is quality, that it has been reviewed by peers and they were able to reproduce it, or were able to see that it was correct or right or arguable at least. So the library website, the database is there. That's the best way to find peer-reviewed sources. Google is not as good at finding peer-reviewed sources as a dedicated database that has all of these peer-reviewed sources in your field of study already in it. So I just mentioned journals, so that's what you're going to want to do. There are journal searches. You'll find through the library website which one you should use, as well as others. Like you could use Google Scholar, for instance. That's a good way to look up, a current research and how often has it been used, how often has it been cited recently, all those kinds of things. So we'll look at the website to show you all of these things here in a minute. The other thing that's really good that the library does is that you can get help. You can go into the library and ask a librarian, but you can also use on their website, they have a chat function where a librarian will answer you in real time. So that is great. But you can also email them. You can call them. There's a bunch of ways to contact a librarian. And if you can't find something, the library can get things in for you. And usually within 48 hours or so, if it's an article. If it's a book, it may take longer than that. It might have to be shipped. But with an electronic copy of a journal article that we don't have access to at CWI, is generally pretty quick. So let me go over to the library site and show you what I'm talking about. So here we are on the CWI library website. It's at cwi.edu/students/academic-resources/library. So if you go to the main page, you can click on that. Those are just the trees that you can see with all the links that you can click from the main page. So yeah, if you go to cwi.edu, you can click on students. You can click on academic resources. It'll pull up a page and the library will be listed there. And you can click on that. It'll take you here. That's the easiest way to get there. So notice here we've got lots of links here. We've got searches. We got get help, hours and locations, top databases, requested services, faculty resources, library staff. So if you're looking for something, you can just type it in here and it will find it. If you want an article, if you want a book, if you want a video, research guides are all here. Those are all really useful. If you want to get help, come down here to get help. You can search the Learning Commons FAQs. You can call. You can text. You can email. You can schedule an appointment. Or over here, right behind my head here, we have a CWI library staff is online with a little form to fill out to start a chat with them, like I said. So this is a great way to get real-time help from someone who knows what they're doing when it comes to research and finding resources for students. Here is a list of the top databases. So there are a bunch of them. And like I said, different ones are kind of useful for different things. One for kind of the sciences and peer-reviewed stuff that's kind of is used across a lot of different fields of study is EBSCO. This is this first one right here. And it looks like this. This one will get you a lot of things. That one's very useful, especially if you're in like the sciences and stuff like that. Another really common one, if you're in the oh, their homepage looks different now. If you're in the humanities, history, literature, art, all those kinds of things, JSTOR is the best one, right? So, and you can create an account. You can log in with your CWI email, and you'll get you'll have or you use it in the library, and you'll have unlimited use of articles. If you use your private email, you can also get free articles. They give you up to 100 a month, so you can use this even when you're not a student, and you can save them to your workspace to use them later, etc. So JSTOR is great if you're in the humanities, but there's a bunch, and so they're located here. But these are kind of the ones that are most likely for you to use. Canopy is a website with documentaries and kind of things like that. So if you're looking for video, documentary, audio, you might find it there. There's other ones here too, and they have a whole list of all the different ones, and they have descriptions so you can see which one you want to use. There are really, really narrowly focused ones like Basque database. Your research question is about the Basque people. There's a whole database just full of things about Basque people. There's all sorts of things. So make sure you're coming to the library site, you're looking at these, figure out which one of these databases is going to be the most useful for you, and that's where you want to probably spend the most time searching for your sources, because again, this is where you're going to find high quality peer-reviewed sources. If you search Google, the links that come up are not always the highest quality. SEO, things like that kind of skew what we see and what comes up first in the search results. It's not always the highest quality thing. Oftentimes it's not. So you can also, if you are just trying to read some research, you can book a study space in the library to have a quiet space to read and work on your research, etc. So keep that in mind. So I've mentioned peer review sources. What are those? Again, if the best way to think of them is when someone publishes a study, they did an experiment of some kind, right? This is the kind of the easiest way to illustrate it. They send it to a journal, and the journal sends it to its readers who try to reproduce it or verify and validate the data in it. So when that's done, we've had multiple people do the same experiment or validate the results of that experiment, so we know multiple people say that this is, who are experts, say that this is probably true. It's probably good. High quality, I should say, instead of good. So what are they? There are a lot of different kinds of peer review sources that do different things. And you may want to use one of these or several of these, and you'll find that you use them in different ways and for different things in your writing. So most of these will be, a lot of these will be secondary sources, like a meta-analysis, right? Takes a look at a bunch of different studies, puts them in conversation with each other, and figures out what do all these different studies tell us. So that's a secondary source. If you do like, but if you have just like an experiment, like a psychology study on populism and conspiracy theories in the public right now, that would be a primary source. If you see a review of 3 books on conspiracy theories from different disciplines, that would be a secondary source, because again, it's taking primary sources and it interprets them, puts them into some sort of narrative or picture that we can understand. What do all these things actually mean? What do they say about the world? What do they say about people? A collaborative education study on using AI for teaching reading. That would be a primary source. A proposed framework for NPC design in video games. That would be both primary and secondary. So there's lots of different peer-reviewed sources. So, and there are, I can show you what these are. These are clickable links here. So, for example, why is this one both a primary and secondary source? Let's look at it really quickly. Let's look at the abstract, because that's going to give us a bird's eye view of what this is actually about. Personalized video games have the potential to provide unique and meaningful experiences for the player. User data taken from biosensors, questionnaires, or in-game performance data can infer a player's psychological state, to which relevant game features can be adapted to enhance the player experience. This survey discusses the data types, game elements, and methods that have been used thus far to create adaptive experiences in games. The survey specifically focuses on personalized non-player character companions through adaptation. Studies using performance data, affect and cognition, and self-reports to adapt companions and other NPC types are reviewed for their success in providing an enhanced experience. So what we have here is a primary source, which is the actual data from like the sensors and things, and the questionnaires, where people put how they felt, what they thought, etc. And then we're putting all those things in conversation and saying, what does this tell us about non-playable characters in video games? So now we're getting some interpretation. We're making connections between kinds of things. So we have primary sources in this, but it's a secondary source because there's another layer on top of those primary sources of analysis. And how do I make it full screen again? There we go. So we'll talk more about all these things. This is just kind of an overview. There will be another lecture that I will put out on Thursday. There actually will be 2, a short one about AI and how to use it for research, and then one focusing more on some of the things you'll see in Module 4. So this kind of goes over the things that you're going to be looking at in Module 3. So what should you do next? These slides were from yesterday. So by last night, you should have had readings on exploratory research, library basics 4, 5, and 6, and respond to your classmates on their revised version of their research questions. So make sure that you get those done. I haven't graded them yet. So if you haven't yet responded to your peers, you still have some time to do that without getting a late grade on that. By Thursday, you're going to go through Module 4, and you'll read the examples there. There's APA resources and AI tools. Those are readings that you'll do. Those are linked in Canvas. You will be looking for a peer-reviewed source having to do with your research question, and you will submit a short article summary of it. The requirements for these things are in Canvas. I think the directions are pretty clear, so I won't go over them now in this lecture. But if you have any questions about how to find a peer-reviewed source still, if you're not sure if the source you found is peer-reviewed, please send me an email. I'm happy to answer those kind of questions. Or again, the library is a great resource for doing that. They have librarians who are experienced in research that can really point you in the right direction if you have specific questions or just don't know what you're doing. And then next week, you'll be putting together an annotated bibliography, and you'll be doing a draft of your introduction. That'll be kind of the first half of the week up to, and then you'll do a few more things as we get into Module 6. So keep that in mind. That's the pathway that we're on right now. Hopefully you're on track. Again, if you have any questions about anything that's due, please send me an email. I'm always happy to answer. I'm always happy to jump on Zoom when both of us are free. I am a resource at your disposal as well, so please don't forget to use me as a resource, okay? That's it for today's lecture. Make sure you're following all the things in Canvas, and I will see you soon.